Cool. Now we're back on episode 8.
How can we be back? We just started.
It's the same day.
Already in with the
And we're back.
philosophical
No,
quiz.
And we're back.
Yeah, sorry. No, this is episode 8. We're back from episode 7. You know, and in your time, this has been a week, listeners. Shout out to Australia. I got 2% of my listeners are Australian.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What's up?
Didn't expect that.
Cool. I was really curious why we were shouting
Yeah.
out
Or
to
any
Australia.
from New Zealand, though.
No, there's one from I think Bulgaria.
Kiwis. Pick up the pace here.
Yeah, a couple Canadian ones. So what's up? What's up?
What's up, Canada?
Canada. Yeah.
Francophile or regular Canadians? Do we know?
I don't know, just regular Canadians. I'm assuming. But anyway, the voice that you don't recognize is Samu Ron. Samu is my. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? The last name.
Ron?
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
People have a hard time with their first name as well.
Samu. Samu, not Samu.
Don't.
To all you
You're-
fucking
you're-
Chicagoans.
Just put it
Yeah.
in their brain already.
Samu.
Also joining me today is John Wickholm. He's the part-time co-host when he's got time. You know.
Yeah, whenever I'm... Well,
Yeah.
almost every episode, so I've
Yeah,
made
just-
enough
yeah.
time.
Yeah, he makes time. He's a very nice guy. He makes time for me.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
doing this. It's
He
silly.
does my weird experiments. So yeah, Samu, you are a
Human ASMR.
I'm trying.
Yep.
I'm not very hard, though.
That's what we expect.
not trying. Don't try in life. Don't do that. But you're a beer aficionado. So your whole life is beer, basically, right?
And metal.
I don't know. I mean, it came rather laterally into what I ended up doing, but I do a lot of beer now. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, you have a very sharp palate, you'd say.
I practice it. Practice. That's the key piece. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your initial draw? Not to, like, obviously we know why we drink beer, but what was your draw to consider beer a study?
In terms of as a profession.
Yeah.
Oh,
Even if it was just a hobby of trying to understand and
I
unpack.
didn't like it actually.
I can't even imagine that.
No, but I found fermentation interesting. So this is, I don't know, maybe when I was 13 or whatnot, 14, 15. Fermentation, distillation, weird microbes and how they do things to food to make them different. And the time that it takes to do that also. So it's both a sensorial thing and a temporal thing was interesting. And then how that connected to a lot of cultural background, storytelling. It was very fraught with whatever sort of avenue you wanted to pursue. But for many years before I found any kind of alcohol actually palatable, the process was intriguing. And then years upon years later, long story we can get into maybe another time, but eventually found out that it
podcasts
could
never go
be,
long.
It could be tasty. And particularly exploring the range of things like the American IPAs, all to the Belgian category and German lagers and whatnot, as a way to back into history in a sense, and then let the sensorial piece, just the way that it smells and the way it tastes and the way it feels, and then even how it looks, kind of tell a story and then be a time capsule of sorts. I guess, which seems rather apropos of this 6-year-old beer we're drinking now.
Yes. When and maybe why did it transcend from the desire to understand to career choice?
Well, music was first. Music, theater, journalism, photography, I guess sort of the arts in general, were all part of a possible path. But was interviewing with Sony in Copenhagen when I was living in Sweden with family. And it was a bizarre time of transition and change within the industry at large, around 2011 or 12, at which point nobody wanted to pay for art at all.
Do they now? I don't think they. Okay,
exactly.
That's what I thought.
At that point was interested in beer and beer culture and had enough experiences to know some of what I should be looking for, if not everything, and happened into an experience at Ølbutikken in Copenhagen, which is the bottle shop run by the founder of Evil Twin, and
nice.
there tasted so many lovely things, Actually, this is quite apropos since having a goose now, and I had a goose then. And it was struck by the idea that all the conversations that stem from that kind of experience was there for something like 5 hours, talking about everything that surrounds beer, history, culture, politics, chemistry. Well, it's just a long list, arts, anything really. The way in which this can facilitate that kind of conversation. Obviously, this podcast is not about beer, but beer is still on the table, so it is present in a lot of these goings on.
Oh yeah, we're always drinking
And
when we
is
do this.
some of what brings these diverse experiences to the fore and provides an avenue for people to meet.
Yeah.
And since you cannot download a beer
Not yet.
it seemed to be a slightly
I
more
hope never.
reliable career path than symphonic doom metal. So here we are.
Yeah. My point with that being, so this is the Ganzfeld Files podcast, and occasionally we do the Ganzfeld Experiment, where we are
Occasionally, that's all we do for this podcast.
That's all we do for
That's
this
the point.
That's true. Yeah. So when we're doing the Ganzfeld, we are blindly going into something, and we're having to describe what we're seeing in there, which is like similar to what you do with a beer if you're doing a blind tasting test. So like, like you have these list of describers that you already have, like, like floral notes, like if it's like nutty, or if it's if it has like a heavy fermentation, or if there's like some cam yeast, or something in there. You'll be describing this beer with the vocabulary you already know, but you don't know what the beer is, which I'm sure you've done blind tastings before.
Oh, of
right?
course, yeah.
Yeah. So it's similar to what we do here, and this is probably why you're a good candidate for this podcast as well, is that like you could be sitting in our brand new Ganzfeld chair that we just came up with. You'll be sitting in there.
Hammock for the soul.
Yeah. And you'll be describing it, and it's very similar. I equate it to a wine tasting, where it's like I know what this is, so this is very similar to this and that. I'm getting like hibiscus, or I'm getting this, or I'm getting these kind of notes. For you, it would be the same thing, where it's like you're seeing something. Oh, I'm getting like water, and I'm like I feel like I'm on a beach, or I'm getting like this sandy feeling. So you, being someone who has done a lot of blind tastings with beer, should be able to do this pretty well.
Interesting proposal. I hadn't really thought about that angle before.
I didn't either. Actually, I'm really
Yeah,
impressed with
I
that
like that.
dissection.
Good,
Yeah.
good pull, James. Good pull.
Like,
I have done literal blind tastings where like there's a blindfold on and something's put in front of you, and you
Oh, wow.
have to try
Okay.
to guess
Yeah.
the color, the character, the alcohol level, where it's from, that sort of thing. I haven't necessarily done that in the context of total sensory deprivation and translating.
we should give you a beer at one point.
During the process, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
unexpectedly. I'm just gonna put any beer you don't expect in your hand, and you have to just drink and ride.
Honestly,
be fun.
calling back to Mr. Kevin Black in episode 7.
Hey,
There was an idea of a mid cut of, has there ever been an episode where there is some additional input, since obviously a lot of sensory deprivation, but then stimulate one of the only senses that you have left,
Right.
being either taste or aroma or both at the same time,
Yeah.
and how that could alter the trip. But I don't know.
no, I
Talk
don't think
about
we've
here,
done
so-
that, but it would be.
We haven't done that yet.
Well,
Basically, we're at a
Yeah.
point now where we're trying to do the same thing and always just do small tweaks as we go to see what results
Scientific
change with
method.
that. Yeah, the scientific method. That's we're
Basic
just trying to document
conservation.
something that makes absolutely no sense and just keep putting new things on there and see where it goes.
Yeah, yeah. So when John has psychically viewed a target inside like a manila envelope, I told him like focus on like colors, textures, sounds, dimensions, things like that, and just like describe them. And as soon as you're just done describing that, move on to something else. So like similar to beer tasting or wine tasting, where it's like I'm getting this. Okay, I'm going to move on to something else and try to detect that. So-
Structure, aroma, and then flavor, and then appearance, and these different tiers.
Yeah.
And
Wh-
it's
when you're
oh,
doing
sorry.
that with these envelopes, are these cues that you're giving prior to going into the brain box, as it were? Or is this all
Not
happening
really.
at the same
Like
time?
all I tell John really is just describe what's inside the envelope, and I
Yeah.
let him go from there.
And
Yeah.
he's even gone so far as to, because we were talking like when Kevin was doing it, he can't hear what we're saying, but we still occasionally try to verbal prod him, knowing he can't hear, but hoping that we can kind of pierce through into the subconscious he's toying with, and play around in there. So James had a series of envelopes that he knew what he put in the envelope, and then a series where he would do it blind as well. He would just take a random...
A literal double blind.
A literal double blind. He
double
would just
blind
like
test,
blindfold himself, rip something out of a magazine, put it in the envelope, close it, and then he'd take the blindfold off so he could label it and put it aside so he wouldn't, in a sense, maybe psychically interfere that way.
Yeah, we don't want to have any like kind of spill. Like if he's, I mean, technically speaking, if he's reading my mind, that's cheating. But there's also, I'm also like,
Is it how
that's
can
proof. That's
let's
also
justify
proof.
That's what you're looking for, right?
That would
Yeah.
just be another awesome
Like
result.
John, you're reading my mind again. Stop cheating.
Stop
Like-
doing that.
But actually, wait, why do you call that cheating? Isn't part of this podcast's purpose? I actually haven't really asked the purpose of the podcast. My impression is that it's been an exploration. But if you feel
Yeah.
that mind reading is cheating, then wouldn't that almost be kind of cutting yourself off at the knees?
I think that was more of an early iteration of what James was going for, because he was more replicating what he was reading about this process. We've now made it our own.
Yeah.
Now it's about any weird result that we can document is worth discussing.
Yeah.
So if he did know that and was like, he did an interview with Aaron, who you'd met in the past. And both of them, and they're talking in the podcast, they were both trying to like send, like they weren't saying it out loud so you can't hear it, but they were trying to send things to each other by thinking about it really, really hard and trying to like project it. So I would say now that's not, we wouldn't consider it cheating. We would consider it another interesting result to discuss and unpack.
Sure. I mean, the thing, like the word cheating, I'm like deriving from is like from like operational remote viewing standpoint. So when the CIA had this program that was from, it was about 20-year long program from the 70s to the 90s, they had this thing called operational remote viewing. So they said, okay, well, we need to find this lieutenant or this general who's been kidnapped. You know, where are they? So if you say, oh, well, I see the building and it's here, blah, blah, blah. He's not actually there. He was there a week ago, but now he's gone. So it doesn't really help us that you gave us all this information about where he was a week ago. You described perfectly where he was, you know. But so in that sense, it's like, eh. But as far as like the word like cheating or telepathically viewing into someone's mind who's giving you the target, I mean, in a sense, it is cheating, but it also just proves that this shit is real for sure, you know. So someone can hand you a target. They may know exactly what's inside the envelope, and you may view into their brain and say, okay, I see what he's seeing, so I'm just going to tell him what he wants to hear. Or you can see what's inside the envelope. You know, but that's a whole big fucking mess of like wires that we don't want to unpack right now.
Sure, if you're telegraphing, I suppose, what's inside the envelope, that seems like cheating. But if you're using resources and developing them as the phrase goes, all's fair in love and war,
Sure.
and you find a way to get some access that even if it's a week-old recon, it's still accurate recon.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, in a way. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Not that I honestly...
No, I'm in full agreement. Yeah.
So here we are in episode 8. This is the Ganzfeld Files podcast. What up? Pew, pew, pew. I'm gonna be a DJ. But so here we are at episode 8. We just did 2 episodes in a row. So Samu, you saw Kevin on episode 7, and you saw Kevin get in the chair, and you saw how this whole Ganzfeld thing goes down. What was your reaction?
I know how the sausage is made now.
Yeah.
All the secrets.
More inclined to be like the Soprasetta side than the Frankfurter side, you know. I could sort of pick my spices and poisons. It is, having had so little, well, I wouldn't say no input or awareness of what this is, since we have discussed this kind of practice to some degree before, but I've deliberately done very little research on it.
Okay.
To try to come to it with a fairly open mind. It seems to be highly suggestible based on the conversations that you have that day, the people that you know who are putting you into that environment. If this were to be done with total strangers, that seems like it would also create a cleaner slate, minimize the potential for biases or anything of that nature. But at the same time, I think there's something to be said too for getting on the same wavelength and resonance. If you can be in phase, you can play one note and then feel it echo either physically or sonically on a different octave. And as we talk about planes of existence or whatever else it might be, that seems to not be cheating, like you say, but it does color the experience, yet it might also reinforce the potential to actually get somewhere. So I don't know. I haven't really decided yet, having observed, whether I thought it would have been better to have come in here cold or to have come in here fishy lukewarm, as I suppose I do now. In terms of what's coming out of it, that also clearly depends a lot upon the input of the personality. And then what kind of questions, I guess, are pre-framed, mid-framed, by which I mean the questions that are implied through this potential telepathic kind of experience as you're in the chair, and then post-framed after the fact, having been able to prepare, witness, and then recap. So when I said scientific method earlier, it kind of made sense, but at the same time it didn't, because in something like this, there are thousands of variables at any given moment,
of course,
that make it virtually impossible. Any scientist listening to this kind of conversation,
like, fuck you, there's no scientific method. And we've definitely used that term several times on the podcast. I think a lot of the real purpose of the podcast is I hope someone's listening. That'd be great. It's more about documenting for us, about having, because we've been doing this for so long, and first it was just kind of a fun, weird thing to do while we were on hallucinogen, and James really likes these things. And the more we got results, the more we wanted to play around with it, to the point where usually it was like at parties with friends and silly, not in the right environment, till eventually we went, this can be hard on a person. We shouldn't be so flippant. Environment is very important. And if because we were doing it, but we weren't really telling a lot of people because we really didn't know how to describe it or justify it without sounding crazy. So a lot of this, I think, was to keep documenting some level of results and just say that we don't know what the hell is happening, but there's something interesting here. So it's about as soft as the scientific method could be, but we try, but we've tried every time to kind of contain a little bit more on exactly how it should be done, so that it's not, like you said, like, you know, I told Kevin too much before I got in the chair, and I immediately went, fuck me. Like, I shouldn't have done that. But it's also, we want people to be ready for whatever the hell this is, because it's
primed.
It primes, but we also want to give them a clean slate, and we haven't found where that is, but we're honing that in episode to episode to eventually be never fully the scientific method, but as close as possible to justify why the hell we do this.
Maybe that's a packet of data that you give them beforehand that doesn't have your actual conversation involved. It's here's a little
not a bad idea.
Yeah, it's not a bad, like a little, like send them like a little video.
But there will always be the personal relationships that you have with them. For instance, like we think about the murder box.
Oh my God, the murder box.
Yeah, we got to do an episode on that.
We should do an episode. I should do a Ganzfeld in that basement.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, bring the chair down there.
Does the audience of
I don't think we've talked about the murder box on the podcast yet. No, we should.
Yeah, we'll talk about an episode. We'll investigate a little further.
Yeah, Samu was there when we finally had to call the cops.
When we found the bones.
Yep.
There was bones, and an incinerator. There's a bones,
It's putting me in a great headspace for this.
Everyone just went, huh? And that shit's still there. Like, called the cops, had a police report, never came back.
Yeah.
And I kept, it's a friend's, I'll keep this vague, old apartment. I kept onto a key so I can still touch base on the basement.
Yeah.
Still out there, nothing disappeared. It's almost as exactly as I left it. Now and then the chairs or the stools move around.
Yeah,
That's about it.
That's so good.
Do a little.
It's so good. I'm gonna keep that key forever. I'm never letting it go. I'm gonna keep investigating it.
That's a teaser for episode 9.
Yeah, we should do it again. So down there and see if it just breaks me.
I don't know. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, fine.
For science.
So how I have been describing it lately is that you're not a natural psychic, right?
I honestly don't know what that
Yeah,
means.
okay.
Yes, I
Guess
am.
is-
All right.
Oh, okay. Wow,
I've
didn't
lured
expect
you
that.
in.
Wow,
Holy
damn.
shit. But for somebody who doesn't have natural like ESP, you can do this experiment and have an extrasensory experience. There might be some things that linger afterwards. Like there might be like John's floating eyeball monster who
Yeah.
like attacks you in your dreams. Well, not attacks, but just kind of looks in.
He pokes in whenever I have a hard time trying to sleep.
As James is wearing an actual Mothman hat.
I got
Yeah.
a
at this very
Mothman hat
moment.
on.
Mothman.
Yeah. So you can experience like extrasensory things while you're doing this. It may linger, like I said, it may not. But it's a little experiment that you can do to experience what it's like to have ESP. And like Kevin just did it on the last episode. He was experiencing things probably he's never like really seen before. So it's like you're seeing outside of your own perceptions, your everyday sight, sound, hearing, taste, touch, all that. You're seeing outside of that. You're perceiving, really, is a better way to say it, is perceiving. So
Is there a name for what that other sense might be? Since this is all being filtered through the senses that are known that you just
Yeah, the
listed,
core.
right?
well,
So-
There's got to be something.
Some people call it like the sixth sense, seventh sense.
What's the difference between the sixth and the seventh?
The sixth sense. If you check, look into Lynn Buchanan. Lynn Buchanan was one of the viewers in the remote viewing program for the government. He wrote a book called The Seventh Sense, I believe it was. So he describes the sixth sense as your psychic proximity kind of warning.
Spider sense.
Yeah,
If
it's your
I can
spidey
pull
sense.
into that.
Yeah, that's your
Is that,
spidey sense.
is that Marvel or is that Marvel or DC? It doesn't matter. Anyway,
it's-
Marvel. It's Marvel.
Yeah, Marvel. Yeah.
None of us care. We're not kind of people.
Proximity.
Sony did it. Yeah. Not Marvel, it's Sony. But yeah, the sixth sense is kind of like your spidey sense. It's like your vibes. You walk into a room and you're like, ooh,
The gut reaction.
yeah, like something is lurking around the corner. And then your seventh sense is like your psychic sense. And that's something that you view the future or the past or something
Temporal,
like that.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah,
Okay.
or spatial, temporal, spatial, whatever.
Is the sixth sense also not spatial?
Maybe.
No, that would be
I don't
spatial.
know. I
That'd
think
be
possibly. Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of proximity.
It's a proximity thing for
Yeah,
sure.
so
So it's probably
Primordial, hackles raised kind of thing.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
yeah, that's like there's a lion about to eat me, or a saber-toothed tiger, or something like that.
In
Yeah,
the sixth sense.
that's the sixth sense. Yeah, yeah.
I'm still not clear on the seventh side, though.
Seventh sense would most likely. That's when you're like viewing into something outside of yourself. When you're kind of like
Kind of out of
poking
body
into-
almost?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, you're perceiving something that's like in the past or the future, or you're trying to like view like a target that's far away or
Elsewhere.
something like that. Yeah, somewhere elsewhere. Yeah.
This would have been great to cover in episode 7.
No,
Probably should have
the
told
guy in that
Kevin
episode
about
really sucked. We really wanted to wrap it up pretty quick.
But yeah, so that being said, Samu, do you have any questions for us? I probably should have asked the last guest.
I meant to do that too, and I totally
If you
forgot.
had any questions? Any questions?
What the fuck?
We don't know either. Yeah.
Sorry, Kevin. Yeah.
I don't think I should have questions. I think it's
a good
best
point.
to not
Yeah, it's
have
going
questions.
as
Not
green
to
as
know.
possible.
Unless there's any technique thing, but I also don't want to know that. So
That's a
if
good- that's
I
a
go
good
into
point,
this,
Yeah, I
just
think
as
the
a-
only one to not spoil, like Kevin was talking about, was the not pushing to try too
Don't try
hard,
too
to
hard.
Yeah, don't try too
relaxing,
hard. Yeah.
actively relaxing and seeking at the same time. However the fuck that is.
I will say that I'm so I don't have experience trying to substantively change my consciousness through input, and be that specific senses or chemicals or things. We'll do that internally and solitarily over the course of a period of time, and that's been significant, productive. But to do it in 15 minutes with a pair of headphones, I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be a total bust. I might just sit there and like mumble Gregorian chant, or
Well,
Cool.
yeah, that's fine.
in.
That's fine too. Yeah.
I just don't know. I don't know.
Would you say at this point, because you sat in on the last episode and you witnessed, whereas Kevin we had to really fully introduce. Would you say now between when you first came in and really we've told you about this, but you don't really know what's going on, and now having witnessed, what would you say a change in your thought, opinion?
I don't really honestly think anything.
Okay.
Since we've talked about it a bit outside of this, and I've understood from those conversations the base fundamentals of what's involved, but it doesn't. Well, we didn't see anybody like crawling on the ceilings in the last 2 hours.
Not yet.
Not yet. Maybe I'm the one. It could be.
Yeah,
We
forgot
can
to
pause
mention
this episode and
that.
go back. Need to really
Baby
unpack
crawling
the
on the
crawling
ceiling.
on the ceilings
Yeah.
bit. But no, I don't. I think that the base construct of how this is supposed to go makes sense.
Okay.
And we'll see.
Sure. All
Let's
right.
see.
Rock and
Cool.
roll.
And with that, we're going to take a little break here. Then we're going to switch over to the Ganzfeld effect with Samu.
Woo!
All right. Here we
Thrilling.
go.
When eyes were first opened, it felt somewhat like a sandstorm. Perhaps a dune, several dunes stretched out beneath, over which I was gliding, but it was a static movement, and now, having closed eyes, there is more a sense of pulse. Imagine it is that I'm seeing the capillaries of the eyelids that are resonating with a heartbeat. At least it was when I was silent. Looked briefly like a skull gazing back, seeing inside one's own brain, perhaps. Speaking disturbs that notion. There is a black pillar, centered, kind of inverted, that slowly spread, almost separating two hemispheres. A deep blue core, almost like a small tapestry of stars in a shape of a square that flickers, like looking through a window into some very far removed negative space. It's broader now, an arc of darkness above which there is a hint of an aurora, below this core of warmth, tumult. Dampening. With eyes firmly closed, the refracted skull looking back into the brain returns. I don't think it is looking for or sees anything specifically. There's a slow ebb from the left, almost like a curtain being drawn partially, making modest progress. Almost sort of the lapping of a wave, or perhaps the very slow beat of a wing. And now an entire wave of that emanation passing from here to here. There's still this lava-like pulse here, but it is darker here. It seems that holding my hands in different positions influences the resonance. Here it is more measured, more geometric, more cubical. Here is more spherical, perhaps, with a stronger momentum from the right. It seems to radiate out as much as in. It's not light that goes in a pattern, but rather flares and then is gone. Now we'll see. It is almost as if the eyes are now echoing of sorts, looking in different directions almost, down to the outsides. More Pacific. Much more so. That darker stretch is now below. Brighter light above, even. Something gray here. It seems to be a bluish, slightly purple light centered, but as if it's beyond an eggshell or a dense curtain. When keeping eyes almost closed, not trying to fully close them, it seems to be clearer. I'll try opening my eyes. It is both more foggy yet more distinct. I can chase a black mote filtering off to the right, and then here it's almost a triangle of sorts. There are two ancillary pieces to it. It is as if there is this ash cloud that lives in the corners. Here it is stronger. It seems to grow almost as if it is a fungus slowly molding a piece of cheese. When forcing the eyes open, strongly staring, firmly staring, I see very remotely a dark arc up with one or two adjacent arcs. It appears to be the vein of a leaf or a sprout or some surge. Perhaps it is an arm reaching out from this black pool here, which seems both very close and very far away at the same time. An inverted surface of the sun, undulating, dark, but flaring now that it's mostly gone, feels more now the crash of a gargantuan wave, a massive tidal flow that is crested and thrown up many fragments of matter. It seems to be water, could be gas, and subsiding. It's quite still.
And now we are rolling. We're recording.
And we regret to inform that Samu has transcended to the netherworld and will not return, and it is entirely
Samu's-
our
yeah.
fault.
He is a black goo monster now, so he has transitioned.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Congrats.
Very excited. It's about time. You've been talking about it for years.
Long time.
Yeah.
Long time.
So Samu, you just did the Ganzfeld experiment. Thank you for being here, by the way. Thank you for being on the show.
Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, and now we're going to get into what you saw. So let's start at the beginning. Like, what did you see initially?
Shocker, red.
Ooh,
Wow.
deep.
Yeah,
What?
yeah, that was a big one. I think tried to take a good amount of time at the beginning to kind of baseline, as it were, and figure out what was signal to noise, in a sense, and then hone in on the variables of breathing, or whether I was actually
Turn that camera off.
trying to close my eyes or let them rest naturally, or where the body was, since I still think I felt very aware of my surroundings despite losing two of those senses, but it still also felt very clear that those senses were being stimulated.
Yep.
So trying to find ways to like I say, baseline or harmonize those so that I could get beyond that was the, I think, focus of the exercise at large for me.
I think that of all the ones we've done with people, you had more of a focus on almost interaction of like, now I'm going to try eyes closed, now open, and you were trying to, instead of just passively accepting and seeing where you land, you were experimenting back and trying to find interaction, I guess.
Yeah.
When I first had the goggles on, then it felt more like this bursting star kind of sphere, more like almost watching cells subdivide. But that went away almost immediately.
Yeah.
And from there, it seemed like it could have just been a sonic bath. I suspect that if I were to do this with a huge pile of mushrooms, I might take me somewhere different.
Yes.
That feels like that's a safe bet.
Yeah, you would.
It's a lot.
But I don't know. I think I've without specific kinds of impeti, without an impetus quite like this, I've previously
I have no idea.
octopuses, fingerses, have tried to kind of recalibrate my brain in some ways previously, not necessarily reaching into other realms, but trying to think, reconstruct internally, and then come back out of it. So I think to get into a very distinctly kind of other brain space, it might take some extra horsepower, I guess, is the way to phrase it. But I do still think it was interesting to feel how changes of position would change my sight.
That was
Oh, yeah.
interesting. That was an
Yeah.
interesting part of it. Yeah, there was definitely some times where you were posturing in different ways, and how that changed your vision was interesting too. So, and like I spoke to Kevin and John, who were sitting over there, and I was like, he's doing like different meditation poses. That's what's going on with that. Is right. You know, he's like, you're doing different ways you would like kind of clasp your hands would show you different things, which I thought was interesting.
And I'm not a yogi. I'm not an explicit meditator. I have some peripheral awareness of ideas of like different chakra positions and things. And looking at this kind of experiment, I think that's something that could be very relevant to understand how there's the either just the way it impacts people's brains or how there's actual energy flow. Like, are you connecting to heart piece, or are you trying to then have something that's more cerebral or more fundamental? And I'm not surprised that I didn't end up on some magic carpet ride in the ninth sense, presaging the next episode. But I think that it would probably take me closer to an hour, I would hazard to say, with more deliberate positional positions to be a tautologist, to actually get something other than just the sensorial piece that I was getting. But I do still think there's maybe some things that I can reflect on unpack as I look at it later.
It seemed like we've referenced a couple of times now, like don't actively seek for it. You have to let it come to you. Yeah. And I think you achieved that, but you still were seeking an analytical aspect.
Sure.
Which
surprise.
Right. Shocked. So I get my question to that is because everything that you talked about was definitely kind of more of your first half. And we actually let you go a couple extra minutes because we knew when you started to, like, you started with Dunes and we're like, cool, awesome, Frank Herbert, let's ride. Wow. And then we could hear that you were trying to analyze and understand and try different things with it. And then there seemed to be a point where you flowed back into taking in what you were seeing more. What do you think the moment was that really allowed you to kind of slide comfortably into just letting it hit you?
I definitely, at a certain point, pretty early on, realized that I could have very easily gotten into, this is Dune, this is Arrakis, this is a sandstorm, these are the dunes down there.
But you know what? Yeah, you're like, no.
Where's the worm? Where's the maker? But I didn't want to reference anything that felt that topical.
And we've been talking about it a lot and reading a lot.
Yeah. So I was hoping that by not being as specific, that I would find something more general and also more total, more complete, I guess.
I can see that, yeah.
And then I think opening, approaching with open eyes, it did still introduce the interruption of blinking, which was just this periodic dissociation from the entire experience. But it brought more of the experience internal because there were fewer variables of the degree of tension of the eyes closure and how hard you're closing your eyes and what stress that brings into that side of the experience. Right. I would love to find a way to do this where there is a complete sensory deprivation, since I still feel like I was very much watching something as opposed to
being immersed in something.
Right. I never felt that sounds go away. The white noise felt fairly consistent at one point. At one point, it almost felt like I was like face down on
ass up.
I think you're back on episode 7, right?
Where's Kevin?
I'll get out of that position. I'm sorry.
But with white noise, of course, it's so easy to associate that with waterfalls. And then with nothing in front of you, it felt for a moment as if I were face down on a rock cliff face with the waterfall cascading beyond. But I think that was just the notion of the sensory element and just not having a sight that was actually beyond, or rather, more specifically, being able to look more than 3 inches and even half an inch in front of my face. And that, again, still felt too literal. So it was probably after opening eyes and then trying to identify or describe what I knew were these blood vessel experiences in more general terms, that it felt more, it was spatial and interpretive, I guess. But I also felt like, again, I was trying to do this in 20 minutes is showing somebody a pilot episode and saying, isn't my show the best? Like, no, it's really when you get into season 4 and then you realize that this relationship has just been a joke the entire time and this person's been asleep and they're dreaming it all. That's what I'm waiting for. So, if we can do this for like 3.5 hours.
We've been pushing our time limit every time we become more and more comfortable. So honestly, come back and do it again. Let's all just go hard.
Go really hard. We tried to do it with 2 people once. It didn't work out so well.
That could be strange.
That was rough.
So with your perspective, your perspective changed a little bit. So it felt like you were looking externally. Then you were looking internally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we'll expand on that.
Sure. The internal piece was mostly with eyes closed, which is, I suppose, appropriate. And that was, this pulsing, 3 dark circles that seem to replicate eye sockets and the nasal socket, and it didn't seem to be trying to tell me anything specifically. It didn't seem ominous. It didn't feel like me, I suppose, and it was present but not pressing. It was observing, sort of much as I might have been observing whatever it was I was observing. This was in the scope of the total landscape that I might have been looking at, which, if I were to describe it, I think I described at some point like just gargantuan. Felt almost like looking at an entire event horizon of a planet, or rather the visual horizon of a planet, and these are like these solar flares, and this is the atmospheric just eminences of, you happen to be 4,000 miles tall and you're just scrolling over to Venus and seeing what's happening there.
Don't look at Venus. Oh yeah, it's
right. It's these solar waves almost, and amidst this multi-thousand mile expanse, there is this face that's embedded in it. That is just blinking back a little bit.
Jesus.
Somewhat Pacific.
Yeah, we were curious about that. What do you mean by Pacific?
I realize the overlap with the Pacific Ocean and waters and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's where we were at.
It was not malevolent. There wasn't anything about what I saw in that was trying to push me away or to tell me that I shouldn't be there, or if anything, it was it didn't feel as though it was apathetic, I guess. It felt as though it was metered, but maybe also waiting, so that if I had, like I say, been in there for another hour or so, that it seems sort of stone-faced and passive. Like, here's the first layer, right? And if you're patient enough, maybe you'll get to the next layer.
So do you think this was some kind of guide that would...
It didn't seem to indicate anything that was explicitly guiding. Maybe a waypoint, perhaps.
Right.
Something that is a reflection back, manifesting something that you feel comfortable identifying 2 eyes and a nose, right? This is a literal pulse,
or whatever.
a pulse of your own heart amidst this broader spectrum. So your pulmonary system is building this, much as this microphone, actually, this kind of cute bud and roundness of this static color. And then there's something deeper within it that is attempting to identify, or is your own projection onto that, and trying to reconcile the briefness of a pulse and the amount of time one is actually in that space versus the vastness of these broader waves, you need to find a long period of time to bring those two things to level.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, because your perspective is different when you're doing this. It's not like your everyday senses. It's
No.
a different type of perspective because you're perceiving with, like we were talking about earlier, like a different sense.
A much
than your-
longer lens.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah,
Yeah.
a longer lens, something that can see beyond, like our spatial, like 3D reality.
Yeah.
You know. Let's talk about the inverted black pillar.
Yeah, so
What was that about?
Yeah.
That, as was happening, I was thinking of that almost as if it were a wedge, in a sense, that was suggesting a bifurcation of brain hemispheres.
Whoa.
So coming straight down, right from the top, and then kind of trying to push apart these two sides to dissociate this from the other, since I know I described a lot of things coming from the left bottom here. And I think it was after that, I could be wrong, but it was after that that this inverted black pillar thing arriving from the top and then slowly pushing down and then kind of broadening the two sides.
Was there, I wasn't sure specifically, but you said around that time, a blue glow. Was the blue glow emanating from the split?
Eventually, yes. That was one of the more distinct images. There were not many distinct images at all. I was trying to define them as they were beyond this, like I say, this eggshell or this veil of sorts. But the most specific distinct image would have been, and it was odd too, since so much of this was happening as if it were looking straight onto something, but this was on a tilted angle, as if it were sort of a 3/4 look, and would be I don't want to even describe it as a tablet, but some sort of rectangular piece, primarily black, bleeding into black with these little blue sprinkles, as if it were looking again through this distant window into some far removed star system, or the way in which, as you look at bioluminescence in water, these tiny little microbes and things and little fishy bits, the eggs and things, fishy bits. You can't see the finger, but I can just stroke the microphone. You can maybe hear that.
Give you a better understanding of what we're laughing about.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was existing this odd 3/4 look, so it was sort of halfway towards where I was and halfway towards some piece else, and that was kind of undulating. It was close and it was far away in that inverted split.
And this this curtain that came in from the left, do you feel like the curtain when it came in, was it something that was trying to block your vision, or?
I don't know. It didn't feel urgent, actually. It felt, I know we've touched on this, or rather you've touched on this previously about this blocking sensation. To me, this is probably the one topical reference I make, but it felt a bit like Mulholland Drive, where there's a certain part late in the game where these 2/1 spoiler alert characters are watching performance and things are being staged. Yeah, it felt staged, I guess, that, but not insincere. So it wasn't as though this was some falsified front. It was rather, here has been something that's been presented, and then it was this slow tug, almost as if I could have envisioned, and maybe I did envision, that it was like a deep blue curtain being slowly pulled from the left to the right, from the very bottom by a homunculus, just this tiny character that I couldn't see behind the curtain. Backstage, grabbing the curtain, just little step by step, kind of almost a hunchback lumber, as it were. Like, all right, this scene is done. Thanks for watching, and now on to the.
If you could imagine a
next
name
thing.
for this homunculus, what would you name it?
well, this is insider baseball, but my first thought is Douglas.
Yeah. No one gets why we got excited about that.
No.
Insider joke.
I love that name.
So let's see. I'm looking at my notes here. You saw a triangle. The same thing that.
Yeah, we got some wings, some
Yeah.
water, some triangle.
Yeah, I don't think so. I know that this was perhaps again influenced by.
Yeah, that's what we were curious about.
Yeah. It didn't feel well. All right. So I think there were a couple of key differences. One of which was that it felt. It didn't feel sudden. It didn't feel central. It didn't feel interrupted. It felt as if it were all part of the same thing, and it was specific from the. If I were to describe this as the hours on a clock, from 10 o'clock, this wave, as if I were looking down on the seashore and seeing the waves come in and arcing from the top down to the bottom with this flow, and it was the specific billowing of a wing or billowing of a curtain that was flowing, but it wasn't two, it was one, and there was no specific entity attached to it. It was as if it were a completely disconnected. The curtain had no rings. The wing had no corpus. It was simply its own flow.
Existence, its own.
Yeah.
Was it against a black backdrop?
There was the darker piece. That was the darker piece that was against the red, the purple, the warmer tones. Actually, no. Purple is on the opposite side of red, isn't it?
Yes.
The extreme tones, I guess.
That's in the blue area. It's always interesting to me when people see color when they're doing this, because it's really all red.
Yeah, why the fuck should you see any color?
You shouldn't see any.
There was
color.
definitely color.
Like
Yeah.
when the red, like I would get some color changes. Usually it was like reds to yellows, oranges, obviously within that color spectrum.
No yellows, no oranges, blues.
That's wild.
That's weird. Blue is weird.
Blues, purple, also a muted white, as if it were a soft white that was again seen through a fractured lens, something like that.
Did you ever feel at some point like the color was being blocked from your view, like you were being covered?
No.
Yeah.
It was almost as if this inverted wedge. It was not a triangle. It was decidedly more of a long wedge piece that was pushing down and then broadening out, almost carrot-like. And that was when that blue square rectangle showed up with those. Well, suppose that the rectangle itself was black, and then the imprints therein were these little blue snippets. It felt, kind of in retrospect, a little bit how one is given to understand theories of the universe, of the galaxy, that here's the structure of reality, and there are these boundaries of what the Big Bang has done, and the red shift and the blue shift, and it's kind of stretching out this way, but there's still the
infinite expanse.
The infinite but not infinite, because if you're trying to... you're trying to measure, 15 billion years ago, whatever it was, how far has that gone? If I were to sort of jump down the rabbit hole, I suppose this would be trying to say, here's this big picture of where things are at, and all these are different galaxies that you're gazing at from the Tetraverse, if that's a word. It's not.
No.
Heard it here first.
Into the Tetraverse. That's what this episode's called.
You got to go through the new black hole we finally photographed, and then you're in the Tetraverse.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It just looks like Nintendo or something. I don't know.
It seems like your trip that you just did was more of like you kind of exploring the universe. It felt like you kind of like stepped back and you're like, I want to look at everything as a whole, and go back to the beginning of time, kind of thing.
That'd be great. Yeah, we'd love to do that.
Sure.
I recall the first astronomy course I ever took. One of the first questions I had for the professor as he was describing the age of the universe and how things are measured from like a Big Bang origin point. And I said, great, how? So you're measuring the distance of light that you can see as a sort of a barometer for the age of the universe. But how do you know where you are in this footprint? And does not then your position within that place kind of give you a distorted look as to where you are? And I'm sure if there were amongst the dozens of astrophysics who are rabid listeners of this podcast,
we have
course.
a huge
Yeah,
community.
dude.
Mostly the ones in
I
Australia.
think that's actually
Sagan,
that's
yeah.
quite peculiar, right? So if you are somewhere in the universe and you're trying to figure out where you are and you're looking into the corner of it as a point of reference, how do you do that? I have no idea.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't even know if they know. I think we're strongly in guesstimation still.
Yeah.
But you got to have some answer to justify why you went to school for it and spent all that money. You know, you got to figure something.
Plus side, I only took the one. I asked him this question. He took a yardstick, swung it like a baseball bat, and then sort of chuckled and moved on.
All right.
So it was interesting that you got some. Did you get some blobs? Did we get that?
You got a
as
little bit of
well? Yeah, a
blob.
little bit of blob in there.
Not as much. It was brief.
I know there was a gray blue mass.
Yeah, I wouldn't feel it was a blob. If there were the masses, any sort of broader, anything that felt like it could be a singular entity was the only thing that felt like was actually a proper singular entity would have been that blinking skull-like face.
That's what I was going to ask
That's
about
it.
next.
That's
yeah.
The skull face.
Everything else felt as if it were much more planetary in scope. There was nothing that felt like here's this person, this humanoid form.
Yeah. Some personality.
Correct. It was much more broad, vast. Yeah, that there was no point where I felt like there was a hand or an arm or a voice. It was
Amorphous kind of
a
thing,
much
yeah.
larger reach. Yeah, and thus too looking at that square, I felt as if it were incalculable in size, even though within that kind of wedge it seemed very small.
Yeah, I can get that. I feel like, we've described certain things of size and structure that, like, even like Kevin was like, it's expanding, but it's not getting closer. Like, so it's,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times you're trying to describe size and space, but in a circumstance where it's not within our understanding of space and size. It's,
Sure.
You have to understand and describe it so that we can wrap our heads around it. But when you feel it, like when you're floating in whatever this is, this experiment, size suddenly doesn't matter. Everything is what
The
it,
size
what it
doesn't
wants.
matter. It's just that perhaps the distances involved might be so great.
Yeah, there's no measurement. I would say
That's-
less than it doesn't matter.
There's that if I'm to jump into your pool, the human construct is not attuned to understand that scale of difference. So I think about, for instance,
Yeah.
this could be totally apocryphal, but some studies about trying to understand some of the undiscovered tribes, as it were, and again, this could be completely wrong, but certain populations within dense forests, I think this was in Africa, who had not gone outside of the forest. So when they did not have as much depth perception as those who had lived outside of it.
Oh, okay.
And again, could be totally wrong, but if it's wrong, it makes for a great story. That if, again, jumping into your pool, if you're trying to go beyond the celestial veil and look into galaxies beyond,
It expands
we
beyond
frequently have a
understanding.
hard time looking at what that magnet says on the refrigerator 15 feet away. How am I going to understand what this
Yeah.
space
Millions of miles
tentacle
away. Yeah.
solar flare from 3 billion light years away?
Right.
So it could have increased in its size 100% in the time frame that I was there, and I just wouldn't know.
I wanna go back to the skull too before we progress too far. You, I think, twice described it as looking into the skull.
Sure. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
It felt more present. It felt more tangible. It was closer. It felt less observational. and I suppose that's why it felt more as if it were looking in. It was obvious that it had an echo, a resonance with my internal pulse, or the degree to which I was trying to flex my eyes closed or open. So in that regard, it was clearly somewhat just the brightness of the light relative to what my eyes were doing. But at the same time, who knows? As this experiment is attempting to remove some of those stimuli, there are different alignments, or as we were discussing earlier, resonances. So if something is aligning on this spectrum but not that spectrum, it's sort of waiting for its moment to strike, I guess, maybe, perhaps. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
A bit.
It didn't, though, feel invasive or obstructionary. It was a mutual regard.
A mutual, what the fuck are you? Hey, how did you get here?
Yeah.
You're okay. I'm not sure that we're friends.
We've described that before too. Like, even when I've described, like I said, like something's felt, maybe semi-threatening or intimidating. I never fully felt distressed, but I felt like the curious, odd person out in a scenario where everyone wanted to witness and watch, and there was interaction in that. But usually, like with his goat with multiple eyes, with my shadow creature, with a lot of places where we landed, it really does feel like if you were the first, the first white person to walk into a
First contact.
remote, first contact, yeah,
First
when
contact, yeah.
where as long as it doesn't turn into violence, as it often does, because we're all idiots. But
always
when you
does.
just do that, what the fuck are you? Let's not get involved. Let's stare. Let's observe, but let's keep a distance and respectfully walk away.
So you're saying that every time that
Not every time, but a lot of the time.
have either of you or any of your guests ever had a session where there was just total tranquility?
I had a bit of a switch. There was I was describing to you earlier where I would see within my view everything was fractally and spinning and cavernous, and then these little shadow things started to appear, and I could pick each one, even though like literally all of them were ephemeral. There was no real structure, but I could pinpoint which different blob had which different personality. I could track them, and I kept saying, I have no idea why I know. I just know I know. Like, this one is the weird shy one that kind of leaves. This is the one that's a little bit more imposing. That one did have like a shoulder for a while, and then the shoulders weren't there, but would get really close to me. Like, but there was like 5 or 6, and I kept calling them different things and understanding what their intent and their curiosity was, and that's how I described them. And then as that continued, and every time, so when I was, because same thing as you were doing, I'm just talking out loud. When I discussed the one with the wide shoulders to James, he would get close to my view and intimidate me. When I would talk about the quiet one would leave. So it's like they were understanding I was discussing. Like if you're just standing in a park and pointing at me like, this fucking guy over here. I felt like that. And that started to become, I guess, not for me, but I could feel that they were becoming tense by my observation and discussion. And then at one point, James lit sage because he got stressed out that I was gonna get squirrely on it. And right after the sage went, I started describing. I said, I feel like I'm laying down, and I feel like I'm in a place of worship, but for them, like I feel like I can see the peaks of almost like what would be a church, a very cathedral space, and it felt much more calming and tranquil. And I truly felt that me being there was a respect that I had been entrusted to go. Like the front was the people at the gates being like, "Get the fuck out of here! Who are you, you weird monkey?"
Yeah.
And then I got in. Then once calming and everything, I was in the cathedral, and then I said, "Now I feel like I'm laying in the grass, but I still feel like I'm within the sphere of this place of worship, this place of peace. That I'm just outside of it now." And it was very tranquil and calming and very stark in the like being the only person in first contact versus a bunch of people meeting you and then being brought in and welcomed. And I really felt that.
But that was still connected to the prior experience of having been the other.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's ever been a session. I would say it's also sometimes pretty hard to be on mushrooms and be like, yeah, everything's really relaxed. There's always a level there's always a level of like
Variable. I
anxiety
don't
and
understand that.
tension
Yeah.
and trying to still also find that calm.
I've had periods of tranquility while doing it, but like John said, it's like it can be very stressful sometimes when you're doing it on psychedelics, and it can be really rough sometimes. But I've had like points where I'm like, oh, I'm seeing this and this is nice and it feels like I'm here in this place. Even though when I was like seeing that house, I wasn't like, I was the only one there. So it wasn't like I was being attacked by something, but I've had moments of tranquility, but you know.
Have you ever rediscovered something? Or is it always different?
Usually it's different.
Usually it's different, yeah. There might be some similarities, but I never felt like I landed in the same spot twice.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this too is like John and I have done this a couple of times now, and the more you do it, the easier it is to step into it.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, you become practiced. It's like stretching or just muscle memory.
Yeah, just like any other skill. Yeah, and it's easier for you to pick up on things, and easier for you to reach out into the ether every time you do it. It's just like any other skill. Yeah.
I myself felt that I could have gone on much longer.
We know.
Without getting bored.
That's why we were letting you go
Oh
for a
my
while. And
God,
even we had to
it
be
was
like, we should got it at some point.
He's
but
like free associate.
I told him like, man, just let him go a little longer. See where he
Good,
goes.
good.
what he does. Yeah. It was like at one point it started to sound like you're like singing a metal song. Like,
Yeah. It was like black metal poetry. Black muck in the middle of nowhere. Fog.
black bottle. Yeah. Okay.
Was
So-
there any moment that that felt familiar to you? That felt like there was pulling from some past experience?
I wouldn't say that there was anything specific that I saw, since so much of this was, again, on a large scale. And it felt like if I were witnessing things that they might have been taking place over a long period of time, just played out very, very slowly. But nothing felt eerie. It felt, this is why I asked about sense of tranquility, is that at no point did I feel out of place or unwanted or pushed out or misunderstanding. It was very much native and internal and not even internal, but native and understood. And but of course, this is how this is.
It's a good way to put a lot of
Yeah.
it, yeah. But of course, even though it's completely foreign and nonsense,
It
but
wasn't,
of course.
honestly, it wasn't even foreign. It felt as if it were everything that I saw, felt, experienced seemed to be I don't want to say rehash, but a kind of codifying, in a sense, what felt right or known.
Yeah, I was describing this to Kevin earlier, and I was telling him, I was like, well, like John and I, every time we've done this, we've never seen anything like really scary or horrifying. I mean, the only scary thing is that like you see something that opens your mind up to what is really reality, like what is really out there, and that's the
What is
scary
really
part.
reality, or was really different?
Well, it's just different from like what I've experienced in my life, you know, like seeing like the eyeball monster and like all this stuff. And that's what's scary is like this information that you haven't known before. But it wasn't
that'd be
ever
great.
anything like,
I'm ready for the eyeball monster.
yeah, maybe we'll maybe we'll ring him up and see.
You know, if you turn 8 on its side, it looks like eyeballs.
Oh my God. And with that,
I think time for a fucking break.
I think we're gonna take a little break here. Then when we come back, we're gonna wrap it up. Okay.
Yeah.
Break time. And there we go.
I
Now we're
quit this
recording.
show.
Now we're recording.
Now we're back. So we're back from our break, and now we're gonna wrap up the show here. Samu just took a big bite of a cracker over there.
You remind me of the chocolate rain guy. When he's always gonna close
Chocolate
it.
rain.
Chocolate rain.
What happened to Chocolate Rain? I want to book him on the show.
He was too early in the viral days to make any money. He would just happen to be a rock star.
It's true.
Chocolate rain.
Chocolate Rain. Throwback
That's
Thursday.
a nice color.
What is that?
Actually, you know what we're going to do, because we've been talking about how Samu's the beer motherfucker. So I'm going to give him this. I imagine you've had this beer,
test.
even if I don't show you the
yeah,
label.
yeah.
Okay. So the beer that I'm going to have him sample is Ravinia Brewing Company in Chicago. They're fantastic. Look them up. They're Casa de Guava. It is a Berliner Weiss with a guava.
Guava.
And now he's going to dissect it for us in a Samu way.
Okay. So there are a lot of tangents we could take on this, but the broadest piece is to say that this is a light, fruity, slightly tart, low alcohol beer that is approachable to pretty much anybody. Those who might be on the rosé all day train could enjoy this. Those who like fruit beers, those who like some funk character in their experience can also appreciate this. What's smart about it is that I find with these so-called kettle sours or these quick sours, beers, beers that are...
We're both beer snobs.
So, all right, we started this drinking a 6-year-old Erdgeus from Beaune, from Belgium. A Gueuze that took 3 years to make and then sat in this bottle for 6 years, and it was just marvelous in every way that I expect to know it to be. Within the kettle sour world, this sort of shortcut approach, frequently it can produce these unpleasant off flavors of cereal or sock or mouse and
a lot of
such.
sock.
Just these
Or sweat.
Yeah, that I regret to say that a lot of American drinkers have become very accustomed to, and thus they don't identify them as off flavors. And within this beer, it presents enough of tartness and fruit character and wheat, and it's creamy and it's effervescent and it's fruity and funky and it's well balanced and has a good enough body without being too sticky as frequently happens. So it's just well done, and it's also pretty in pink, which helps.
Nice.
Nice. Well rounded.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what we do all day outside of the podcast, me and him.
So, bringing it back to your experience in the Ganzfeld, the first time you ever experienced the Ganzfeld effect, and you haven't done anything like that before,
No.
have you? Any kind of like sensory deprivation or float tank or anything like that?
Not explicitly. I would say that I have periodically tried to pursue a natural environment that is sufficiently removed from the standard. So off mic, we were talking about white noise and what you feel like you need to be restful, and I personally don't, but I will occasionally, or have occasionally, when it feels like it's an appropriate moment, go towards water or into if there's an adjacent forest or something that's even an approximation thereof, to feel centered of sorts.
Like a natural sound of a spring or a river, yeah.
But it is nothing that's been so explicitly sensory deprivation as was today.
Right. Okay. And if you could sum up your experience, how would you do that?
I need more deprivation.
You want to get more.
It seems we've got you a little
yeah.
intrigued. I can tell that you want to know more.
It actually was sensory stimulation for me.
I would actually agree with that. I think that's how we both feel. We understand the deprivation, which is why we kind of always air quote it when we say that. But no, it's sensory antagonistic.
It's a lot of input.
Yeah.
For me personally, I wouldn't say it was antagonistic, but it was more engaging than I expected.
Yeah, spurning.
If I were to totally step out of my headspace, I think I would need something that was nothing, and this was not nothing.
Of course, yeah. So by definition, saying it's a sensory deprivation thing is kind of a misnomer, because it's a homogeneous field that is created. So the white noise is supposed to work in conjunction with the red light to create a singular type of field that you use to view extrasensory things.
Why is the red light used as opposed to some other part of the spectrum?
I don't know. And in my research, I couldn't find the answer to that either. I looked in...
We talked about this in the way in the past, and my thought was because of the nature, like we all discussed that even off mic, that even though we've discussed this can be seemingly stressful or like you can get a lot of input, you can see some weird shit like we have, it always still feels relaxing and meditative and calming.
Even when it's stressful?
Even when it's stressful, like even
Yeah.
even when like I saw just like full like Terminator level like holding on to the fence destruction of a planet, I didn't feel the trauma of it. I felt the sadness of it, but it didn't like raise my blood pressure. It didn't get the adrenaline going. I still felt I would say it is always like being the ultimate passive observer. You're
melancholy, not agony.
Yeah, you're not. There's no empathy. Not that there's no empathy. There's no empathetic connection. Like you can empathize, like that would be bad, but you don't feel interconnected. You feel full witness. And what I would imagine is if you use certain spectrums, if you're starting to get into more of the blue spectrum, you might just fall asleep.
Huh.
Because I'm calm even in chaos in this experiment. If it wasn't red, I might not be engaged.
I would suggest that we do this again and throw on the other side of the light spectrum.
Oh, yeah.
And see what happens.
Well,
We're all
we
in.
can try different colors.
Have you? Is there no body of work that studies it on a different light spectrum?
There's almost nobody at work about what we are now doing with it.
So when
Ganzfeld
did
is very-
Ganzfeld start?
Around the 1970s.
70s,
And
yeah.
it was always with red light.
With red light, always, yeah. It began in the 30s as a sensory deprivation technique. They didn't experiment with telepathy until the 1970s, and that's a study with Charles.
And it was very
Honerton.
specific. It was about like a lot of it was very like we want you to see a location. So if we want to bomb
targeted
this
trying,
motherfucker,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean,
there was
always
more
a-
focus. We're
yeah.
going loose and we're going universal over our immediate space.
That would be another interesting
and then
variable to
introducing
play
drugs.
with, is to canvas the people that you're working with. Again, in our other life, in a sense, Kevin talked about D&D, but we also have done that, and the notion of purpleness and things of this nature have been things that I've talked about. Perhaps if you are able to tailor this sort of the kind of white space, the frequency that somebody might hear, and then also the frequency of sound, and also the frequency of light that they see, that might put them in a different kind of position.
Yeah, I know that in a paranormal sense, the spectrum of red light it has like the least interference.
Why?
So it's just like the wavelength is spread out more versus like if you look at like ultraviolet light,
Oh,
where
I
it's
see.
like
It's
very
very
sharp
tight.
spikes.
yeah, they're very.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So red light is kind of more spread out
More
as a
open.
wavelength. Yeah. So I think that might have something to do with it.
Okay.
I thought about using like an ultraviolet light, but I was looking at the spectrum of that, and the spikes are just so packed together. I'm like, I don't know if you're going to get anything out of that, but we can definitely experiment with different colors.
yeah.
Seems
That's
worth
where
a
me
try.
and James are. Whenever, like you said, this is episode 8. There's not been, other than myself, there's not been a repeated personality on the show.
Yeah.
So everyone, we're not going to be like, hey, it's your first time. We're going to do something that we don't know.
Correct, yes. Again, the scientific method.
You get the constant that we know is comfortable and not whatever. And like the James has rigged a new thing for the goggles. Instead of a light in front of the goggles, now the light is embedded in the goggles, and the light has a setup that goes from like bright to medium. Samu wanted to go with bright. Kevin wanted to go with medium, which is already an interesting. What does that mean? But then there's a blink phase, and I want to do the blink phase.
Oh, it's so
I kind of
aggressive.
want to
It's
see if
so
that's just. It's
aggressive.
aggressive. It's quick.
God.
I
It's a
want to
stroke.
do.
It's a
I want to
stroke.
do like 5
Yeah.
minutes with shit. I'll do it after we're done doing this right now. We can
my
quick
God.
record it.
Okay.
I want to do 5 minutes of blink and see if it sucks.
Honestly, I think that would be better because it would introduce a regularity to
Yeah.
the experience. The irregularity would be regular. Since what I was describing earlier is that once you open your eyes and then you blink, you are
You'd feel disrupted.
disrupted and you
Yeah.
know that you're blinking. Whereas if you blink during a blink sequence,
That is a good.
it is part of an external experience that
Cool.
you are then thrown into, sort of living on the waves.
Yeah.
That's an interesting turn. Okay, so we were about to wrap up this episode, but John, if you want to jump in and you want to do a blinky,
You want to do a quick blink and then wrap it out?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
I'm in. You got
Cool.
time?
I do.
Rock it. The chaos and you just got very excited. Yes.
I am
All right.
present.
Yeah, let's do a
So,
fucking
yeah,
weird blink.
That's never been attempted before on the show, so John's
This
gonna
might
do
be
it.
the last time I speak to people with a normal brain.
You
Fuck
might-
all of you. I'm
Yeah.
out.
Dr. Manhattan. There we go. Please sound check, John.
Checkity check, check, check. All right. This sucks. Woo! All right. Something about the way that it blinks. It's no longer black, red, black, red. It is a blend. There's a brighter point and a darker point. But it almost, I guess I would describe it as kind of a chessboard. Some spots always stay black, some spots stay red. Top right corner is starting to stay darker. Not like shadows or anything natural, like it just refuses to fuck with the red now. I would say this is definitely more anxiety-inducing than usual. Now the center of my view has a red dot. The rest has a black. There's still a flash. Okay, at this point, it's all moving. Not like shadows bouncing around. Some spots will stay darker. Some spots will be red. They're changing very quickly. But I can, even in the black, there's a flashing sensation. I'm starting to get a... Ooh, shit. Oh. For a moment, I had it's back. What looks like a rapidly spinning mandala that will start small and then grow and then retract. One time while I was speaking, it was 3. It's phasing in and out of, like, spiraling. I shit you not. It reminds me of the old school Batman logo where the logo would spin at the fucking screen. It's that, but it's like really fucking aggressive spinning mandala-y shit. The moment I see it, it's oh, fuck that. Top's black, bottom's red. As I moved my hand, I can move. I can do this, and I can see it change. Black spot just went this way. There's a white, smoky coverage coming in. It's actually starting to block out the everything. I feel like there's a light right here shining in. White light. There's a pattern coming across top right, bottom left. Everything's moving fast, so I have to describe fast. It reminded me of a spinal column. Top left looks like when film melts in a movie projector. Oh, when I close my eyes, this goes bananas. That's a lot. Yeah, I'll describe that later. I don't know what the fuck that is. Oh, I just opened my eyes and I regretted it. Top white, bottom orange, lots of flashing. Center point looks kind of like a star in the distance. I see like what looks like train tracks, but it's all happening in the flashes, so there's no consistency. Train tracks going down a tunnel. There's a lot of white that chooses to cover and moves quick. At times, it feels like my whole vision is washing out into the white, but keeping up the blink pattern. Ooh, dark shadows just made a creepy ass kind of like maniacal face. It was like splotchy eyes and a sharp black grin. Almost like black kind of blobs instead of just being the dark spot of the blink started to move and play with each other a little bit. They just did it again and they moved into the center. Now they're repeating that. I'm getting a lot of kind of arcing patterns, almost that spinal column effect, and they'll kind of move around. They'll be there for a second or two and then move on. Mandala floating. Top white, bottom red. I closed my eyes for a second just before you did it. When it's closed, it has a more... Fuck, it's really hard to describe. It has more of a strong, almost like chessboard pattern, but it's like you like convoluted multiple chessboards. When I then reopen my eyes, I get blasted with shit tons of like white light. The light now has a square pattern at the center emanating out. So there's like line here. The squares seem like they're just accelerating at my fucking face as fast as possible. I'm getting more white and yellow than red now. Ooh, square came out and expanded, and instead of moving past, stuck and spiraled. Nothing is like literal or linear. It's fast and aggressive. It's too much to process. Oof. Going between opening and closing my eyes. Closing is always consistent. It's some kind of like the chessboard pattern I mentioned. Every time I open, it's something completely different. Like right now, it's just like fucking coming at me in weird angles, but then it'll subside. Close my eyes, open again, assault. More blue tones, kind of aqua now. There's no real black. All the blacks now feel kind of aqua toned. The red is more yellow to orange. That was a trip.
Yeah.
That's a shit show. Woof.
Colors and geometry.
Colors and geometry.
All right, now we're recording. Hold, please. Okay, now we're recording. There we go.
Yeah.
Here's my levels. So John just did the Ganzfeld with a blinking red light. So
Very,
this is a very
quick, rapid blink.
Quick and dirty.
rapid stroke. Yeah. So let's.
That's my new nickname in your phone.
So how did this differ from other experiments, John?
The thing that we've been talking about a lot is both on and off mic is kind of almost the tranquil, meditative, almost centering feeling of this. Even, when we've seen some really, uniquely what in normal circumstances would be scary to terrifying or horrifying. Something about the process allows it to still be a calm, passive viewer.
Sure.
This was like
Tranquility.
being tranquility. This was like being repeatedly punched in the face. The blink was incredibly fast, and it started as what felt like a checkerboard, because checkers are black and red. I think because of how quick it was flashing, like my eyes couldn't adjust. So it felt like at first there was points that always stayed red and points that always stayed black, but everything was flashing. Even the black was flashing. It wasn't like a void. And then very quickly everything started to warp. Certain elements of the flash would turn into what I can only describe as like a mandala. And it's because mandalas are very geometric and pattern based, but they were like spinning aggressively and often right at me. I described it as the old Batman show logo when it just really fast and Batman. It was that, and a lot of times it was coming at me, and then there was like 3 coming at me, and then 4, and then different angles. Like there was never a single moment that I felt that I could comfortably sit, digest, and describe. It was just go. Everything changed.
You.
Then like different patterns would arc and move. Like one felt like a spinal column of like something that Geiger would have drawn up. And then what was interesting is when the colors really started to change. The red started becoming more white, and there was literally a period where it felt like someone had put a lamp off the left side of my head, so it was starting to flood the view. You could still see flash, but I lost black and white. But then that would rinse out real fast, and be back to black and red, and then the white would kind of come halfway down, and the red would be here, and then they would fight and move, and it was a series of what I just described, and constantly, rapidly progressing secession. It was rough.
2 things.
Yes.
Thing number 1, I think this is perhaps why neither of us felt that there was any appropriate moment to actually ask a question.
Yeah, I imagine.
If that seems fair.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Thing number 2, did any of this feel as if it were anything other than the stimuli of the noise and lights? Given how sharp and present the flashes were, since this compared to, not that I've been present for prior sessions, but it seems that this experience was much more based on, as we said, geometry and light versus the actual personages and frames and settings and characterizations that you see in other situations.
I would say this felt very completely different. Those other experiences feel like truly finding opportunity to like meditate and move beyond oneself, almost like what's
OBs?
Yeah,
Lucid dreaming.
Lucid dreaming. It felt like a lot of that. It felt like whenever I do Ganzfeld in the normal setting, even though we always change it, it feels transient. It feels connected. I feel like I'm making
transient or transcendent.
A bit of both. Like I feel like I'm traveling. Yeah, I'm still figuring it out. This just felt like the pattern making part of my brain being assaulted and freaking the fuck out.
Would this be good as a
way to drive someone insane and slow brain?
Yes.
Ruin their
Yes,
brain?
I would say yes.
Yeah, that's
no. To present this to you, or rather, not you because you're more practiced in this, but to somebody who doesn't know it.
No, that would be a terrible
No,
idea.
terrible.
I think you would
Absolutely
scare them off and they'd never come back.
Yeah, it's really aggressive.
Yeah.
That's really
I
aggressive.
think what I would like to do again is, try it at the exact same pace, but try it on mushrooms to see if maybe I can lock in with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more importantly, I think the timing of the blink needs to be slowed down just enough so that I can feel the pattern, like the timing, and I can adjust and flow versus just being bombarded.
If we now we're rolling. Okay, sorry, we had a little technical difficulty there. And now we're gonna be back on the show. Here we go.
I don't know if our 6 listeners realize this is really underfunded. I guess what I was saying in brief is that doing the normal process as a level of tranquility, connectedness, it feels like leaving one's body and exploring. It feels more universally connected. It feels like you're tapping into things beyond your understanding. This was just you took bad acid at the wrong rave, and you're trapped in a pit full of sweaty people, and you forgot where the exit is.
Hence my question of what purpose does this barrage serve? If this is something for somebody who's attuned, does it sort of key them into a different space? If it's somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, does it sort of give them a crash course?
I would say this is probably at the blinking pace is probably not conducive to anything other than mania.
I've to like a
is worth
total
studying.
a novice, I wouldn't have them do this. But if
Fuck no.
if we had a way to alternate the frequency of the blink, I would
Yeah.
let John like adjust the levels
That's where
himself.
I'd like to try it
you
out
know,
again.
Yeah.
Actually, as I
Yeah.
think about this to a prior query, has there been any effort at doing blinks of different frequencies of light?
No,
not that I'm
we
familiar with.
haven't. Not that I've read, and not that we've tried on the show. We haven't
Sort of do red versus blue shift.
Yeah.
That
We could
seems-
try that. I do have a light that does strobe in between the color spectrum, so we could
Could
try
be
that
interesting.
out. Yeah, we could
It's
try
all
that.
worth an experiment.
Slow the strobe rate down
I think
to be
like,
less attacking.
everyone
Yeah.
has been at some point has probably like bought a Halloween strobe light and played with the dial.
Yeah.
And when you turn it all the way up, like everything kind of looks in slow motion and jarring. But when you turn down slow, I feel like you could find comfort in the pace. Like it's like listening to someone who listens to fucking chill blues is not going to be able to listen to black metal and understand that pacing.
Well, I'm wearing a street shirt, and
Yes.
that's pretty depressive and slow. So
Yes.
depends on what you're looking
Depends
at.
on what you're looking for.
But I take your point.
And it also might be something that I need to take more time to adjust to. It might be like slowly getting used to faster and faster, kind of like even like we said with music, you have to adjust to the pace and be able to listen to it. There might be opportunity to do it a couple more rounds, try it slow, try a little bit faster. Like you said, give me a dial, and with time I can find my comfort zone. And knowing me, I'll try to always ratchet up a little farther.
I noticed there were some little black creatures that
Yeah, there's
showed
some
up
little
in your
black
vision.
something's
So
like
I-
little. They remind me of the little dust sprites from. Oh God, what's that movie?
Spirited Away.
There it is. Thank
there
you.
you go.
Yes.
Yeah, I smudged as soon as you said that, and I was like,
Yeah, I smelled it.
I was
It's
like, not in my house.
James ain't liking it.
I ain't doing that.
Before we move on, there's one final question I have. Speaking of adding new foreign variables to the circumstance, with our good friend Samu here, we've never done this before. Being that he is the beer. I feel like I don't want to say anything too rich because you'll be like, ugh, fuck off, leave me alone. But like the beer connoisseur that we know him to be, we mid-session, we warned him in advance so he wasn't going to be startled. We gave him a beer that he did. He knowing me, he expected what it was going to be, but we gave him a beer in a blind taste mid-session to see how it would interact with what he was feeling. What was the experience of introducing the beer to it?
Sure. Okay. So, bit of background on that is that I myself have not been heavy in on the hallucinogenic element of what this sort of experience could be, but had the question of what does a mid-session input mean, whether that's mushrooms or whatever it is. And obviously, within my background, that input is most likely to be beer. And one that was brought here today was from a brewery in Minnesota called Hammerheart.
Hail.
Hail, indeed. A imperial stout barrel aged called Skolakotti, which has its own stories that we can reference in a later time.
No one cares about us.
Yeah, probably not. But the question was, if you are mid-session with this sort of sensory deprivation, and then stimulate one of the two remaining senses that are not deprived, what does that do?
Yeah.
And I found that it did indeed change the experience. It altered the framework of, or the pulse of the light that I was seeing, having described it previously as being very more left to right or top to bottom. It centralized things and slowed the pace. So I found it to be a variable worth exploring further. But again, there's also so much to figure out, is this something that you recognize? If somebody puts something in your hand that you already have an association with, as I do with this beer in this brewery, whereas if it were somebody else who was just given like a hit or a bump of some drug that they've never experienced before in the middle of the session, what would that do to them? Who knows? These are all the variables that
Reckless.
That is very reckless.
chaos.
Don't do that.
Again,
I'm available.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but it definitely it did change the experience to some degree.
I think it would be interesting, like, to just sound like an absolute fucking dirtbag, I guess, but with a mind for different drug usage and what it does. Not to say I don't think you should ever take anything that you don't know what it is in any capacity. I think it's dangerous as all hell, especially within the circumstances. But I think it could be interesting. Like, so many hallucinogens have, their time to open within you. But it could be interesting to see, like, okay, in this session, at one point, someone's going to hand you a joint and you smoke weed, which obviously is going to slow some level of you down. It's versus a stimulant where someone could give you a quick bump of cocaine, or the opposite spectrum, a quick bump of ketamine, which is an absolute tranquilizer. I'm not saying that anyone should try this, and we probably shouldn't even try this, but it would be interesting to see if something of an immediate, something with an immediate opportunity could suddenly pivot where you're at.
But how do you, as again, a sidebar, this is obviously not being condoned explicitly, but
No, we're not saying anyone should do this.
No, don't do this.
We've
Disclaimer.
condoned a lot of things,
Yeah.
and even I'm saying this is stupid.
put
As
this on
fuck.
the cutting
Disclaimer.
floor.
Yeah.
But how do you do that without pulling somebody out of the experience of the sensory deprivation as you introduce a new sensorial experience?
I don't think it's possible, unless, like, the only way I could imagine it, like, there's an incredible documentary, it's like the God Particle, the one about DMT that unfortunately Joe Rogan hosts. What was it called?
Is it the guy part?
We'll figure it
I don't
out
know.
and
Yeah,
put it in the
we'll-
notes.
we'll- yeah.
There's a documentary where a doctor decided to run actual tests about DMT in a lab situation. So
they
he brewed a
injected
DMT
it, yeah.
tea, which is usually the most productive way to really experience it, and mainlined it into motherfuckers.
Yeah, it was a
Needle in arm,
intravenous,
mainline. But they're in a safe setting. They're in a lab setting. They have a doctor and a couple of nurses. They're observing all vitals, doing all the shit. And they just mainlined them DMT and said, let's just, tell us what happens. And they were DMT almost always wraps up in about 15 minutes. And some of these people are like, I was gone. Oh, yeah, DMT, the spirit molecule. That's
Spirit
what it is.
molecule,
Great
yeah,
documentary.
okay, there we
Last
go.
I checked is on Hulu.
Yeah.
Some people, even though like DMT has this weird ability to always wrap up in about 15, 20 minutes. A lot of them were like, oh, how long was I gone? And they were like, 15 minutes. Like, oh, I felt like I was gone for a lifetime and a half. Like, I thought I was traveling through space. I lost time and understanding my body. I kissed God's butt cheeks. I don't know what I did. Like, it could be interesting in this kind of setting if you can find a safe way to, unfortunately, I hear even saying this, mainlining, like, because if you have to actively take a drug, it's going to reduce
take you out
the
of the
sensory
experience.
deprivation aspect. If there's a way to kind of be rigged and that you can be unpredictably suddenly sensitive, again, no one should fucking do this.
No, don't do this.
But if that, I could imagine that's the only way, and it sounds fucking absolutely shit reckless.
Coming from the outside of this experience, having seen some of this now the last several hours and spoken on it, if I have a take, it's that it seems like we're thinking about this too small. Still.
Continue.
Okay.
It's too focused on what is this one experience I had, what is this one stimulator that I had, as opposed to what is the vision, what is the effort, what is the sort of the writ large intention, and what are the broad stroke efforts that you make to try to find that piece. So I know you, as the host of this podcast, James, have an interest in this, and you've built some ideas to try to find out how you can try to structure it a bit more.
Yep.
But it's so easy to get caught up in the minutia of all these little variables, and thus you get distracted from the bigger piece. And if you're looking at this long-term scale, like when I was saying from my experience that describing the scale of vision, is this something you see from 6 miles away or 6 billion miles away?
Right.
It's so easy to be distracted by one just tiniest fraction of an angle, and that puts you so far off course.
Right.
So as you're looking at this essentially transcendental construct, how do you try to keep focus on your primary objective?
I think that's a good question. I think right now, at least like we're 8 episodes deep. I think what I've been trying to do is just build a foundation so far, just to get us further out there. And a lot of it is just like I just been like data collecting. So I'm like okay, like if a person, let's say, goes really far with their Ganzfeld trip, we record all that. I usually leave it up to the person. I don't say like, oh, hey, I want you to go like so far out that you see the eyes of God. I leave it up to the person, like how far they're willing to take it. John and I have been pushing the envelope episode by episode, and like we're going a little bit deeper, and then see where it goes. Sometimes I'm afraid of like putting someone so deep that their human flesh mind won't be able to handle it.
Which calls back to another question I wanted to ask. There were actually 2. This is the first. Is you mentioned that you suggested this idea to people, and they have said hard no.
Yeah, some people do say hard no.
Why?
I think it's their fear of the unknown and like the paranormal. And some people say it's like it's too much like ghost chasing or something like that, where they're just like I don't like that. I don't like that idea of that.
It's
I don't
too
like the
unpredictable.
cult. Yeah. They just don't want to go into that world.
It feels
I'm
like there's
okay.
a difference though between people saying they're scared of ghost chasing versus being disbelieving or disinterested in that.
Oh, well,
Right?
some people, like I've talked to, believe it like wholeheartedly. They just don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So those
Yeah.
can be 2 different camps, or sort of a Venn diagram of the overlap between people who don't believe in it and don't care about it, those who do and are wary about it. Do you have an outreach to them to try to bring them in, or just float and say, all right, if you don't want, you don't want?
Just kind of like who I know.
Yeah.
It's my friend pool. Like, hey, here's this weird thing. Some people were like, no. Some people are disbelieving. They're like, no, that doesn't work. That doesn't make sense. And whatever.
We also
I think
don't bring it up a lot, in all honesty.
It's true because we sound crazy.
We sound crazy. Me and James have been doing this for years. Like when he knew that when he pitched it to me, I'd be like, fucking let's go. I don't care. This sounds awesome. Like I'm open. I embrace chaos and I like to try new shit.
Yeah, a lot of people are very skeptical too. So
Yeah.
it's like if you bring it up to them, they're gonna be like, that doesn't make any sense and that's not
Yeah.
real. What are you talking
I'd say
about?
I'm skeptical though.
Oh yeah, we're skeptical
Yeah.
as fuck about this. It's part of why we keep doing it, to try and understand it more. And like to go back to your first question, I think a lot of what we're doing now and the reason why we're going the route we are, like me and James personally are going to push ourselves and find new variables. But I would say the mission is to find people from all walks of life to do just the same thing almost every single time. It's 15 minutes. It's just the red light. It's the same white noise. Like everyone else plays, and like obviously if you would like to return, we'd love to do that. You get to play with variables now. Everyone else plays within a certain structure because we know it's not too terrifying. that
Baseline.
It's our
baseline.
baseline. We know that people should be able to handle this. Even though it's fucking weird. And that's where we're, in a sense, building the data. And like me and James are very different and very similar, and we've been doing it together. So there's definitely an opportunity to wreck our own data because of our constant interaction. But then bringing in Kevin, you guys, you get along, but you're very different people. Aaron, Cato, and it would be, and what we've discussed, we'd like to get to a point where we can bring in strangers, like, I want to do a day where there's a priest and a goddamn pagan. Like, I want to do people who are diametrically opposed and do them around the same time to see what the similarities and differences are, and how does, like, what is what we're seeing a product of just the way our brain is always actually, is the way it is processing information and trying to then put it out into our senses. Like, we have no idea.
Yeah.
The other question I had was, did you ask me any questions?
When you were in?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We were asking you a couple different things. We were James at times was asking you to try and either focus on a certain thing or move away from a certain thing.
Right. At one point I said, like, can you step out and like look at everything as a whole?
Yeah.
You know.
Did you feel there was any engagement?
Somewhat
There was one
here and
time.
there.
There was one time where I think you or James asked for some sort of clarification, and you very quickly then were still on that track.
That would be something else. Another variable that I'd be curious about is the degree to which you know somebody and then have them on, and then their level of engagement.
Yeah.
And then as another variable, even a stranger, if you don't know them at all, but you talk to them, like say have lunch with them, say for an hour, and then they go in, and whether they engage with what you're presenting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we got Samu really intrigued.
Yeah, he's intrigued.
Again, the sloppy scientific method.
Yeah.
That's the fun scientific method.
Oh yes, exactly. Not really accountable.
Nah.
Enough to have.
I'm not trying to
something
be in a
say.
fucking journal. I
Correct.
just want to do weird shit
Yes.
and say, look what I tried to do with a lot of data.
Yeah.
Like we've even been saying, like we want to try different settings. We've done the majority
Different
of them
places.
in this house when it was I was living here, now James is living here. And the one time we tried to do it at my apartment, it went completely sideways and wrong, and we weren't even able to even get into the experiment. The radio was picking up just errant radio stations like constant. I couldn't get into a white noise. I was getting distressed as like we were doing hallucinogens and they were coming in hard, and I couldn't get like music to work. I couldn't get my goggles to work. I couldn't get this. Or my partner Kato was trying to help out with sound, and sound was turning into a fucking like everything that could go wrong went wrong. And when you're on a hallucinogen, you really don't have the faculties, you know.
Not interested.
can't
And we
deal with
eventually
it.
just
Yeah.
quit. We're like, this is not working. And if
Yeah.
we get to the point of forcing this, it'll be more stress than we
Less
need to
productive.
make it work.
Yeah, and that was also an experiment. We tried to do 2 viewers at the same time.
Yeah.
It was me and John at the
Yeah.
same time.
Which we
So-
something about that energy that day just didn't work.
Plus, it was a setting. It was a place, too. Like, you
Place
know.
and time, yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
you like going to cemeteries? Let's do it in a cemetery.
That's
there we go.
honestly, that's one of the things that I would
Sure.
consider or think about as we revisit this is place and specifically time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think there's some level of interaction that location would manipulate a bit, and it'd be fun to
Yeah,
see what that lands.
we're in Illinois, so I'm sure there's haunted cemeteries. There's a couple here in
This
Chicago.
is also the evening of a total lunar eclipse
Yep.
for what that's worth.
Yep.
But
Yep.
There we go.
we missed that time.
So I think we're gonna have to wrap it up here, and hopefully, Samu, you'll be on future episodes, which would be great. More content, hell yeah! Fist bump it all around. Here we go. Boom, boom, boom.
Can be done.
You can't see it,
The
but-
bums. Yeah.
Bones. Anyway, check us out on Instagram, Ganzfeld Files Podcast. Check us out on Google Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much wherever you listen to podcasts. And also check out the YouTube channel because there will be clips of tonight on the YouTube
And the
channel as
last
well.
episode that
And
was
the last
also
episode.
tonight.
Yep, last episode 7 and 8 will be on YouTube.
Do you have any plugs there, Samu Ron?
Me? No.
Yeah, I didn't expect much.
No,
I
don't know.
I had to ask out of politeness.
I appreciate that. Yeah, they're just always things of intrigue and interest, but just pleased to be here for this. As I mentioned earlier, the way in which all these different worlds collect and combine to be invited here, just to learn from what everybody else is doing. It's great.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good. Awesome. Cool. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Episode
Rock.
8. All right, everybody. See you later.
See ya.